I've been to Boca Raton. Boca Raton's amazing. If you're a high school football player and you like amazing, go play for Lane Kiffin, who is sitting there looking like a head football coach. So, first of all, I got to say this. You are Mr. Social Media now. You take jabs at people, you poke them in the ribs. You have really rebuilt your brand, and you are talked about now, ran all the time, all the networks. You're on this show, you're on other shows. So we have a situation at Ohio State that's a mess, and it's ugly. You have been in that world, Lane, where everybody's beating up on you, and you're getting criticized by everybody. Did it affect, Urban Meyer's just dealing with this, did it affect your life? Did it affect your coaching? Did it affect you? What is it like to live in that world where the world's caving in on you and everybody's ripping you and you're sitting there and all you care about your kids? What is it like for Urban today? You've been there.
Well, in somewhat a similar situation. They're always different, but we've talked about that before. I remember myself and Coach Ogeron talking about those situations when you feel like that. It's almost, he used to talk about, because you can imagine he's a bench press guy that, he's got the barbell and they just keep adding weight on. Here's this issue with the player. Here's this issue with the coach. Here's a loss. Here's losing a player in recruiting, and it just keeps adding weight and weight and weight. And it's like, how much can you hold? And that's kind of, like a CEO, that's like being a head coach. It can affect you. And I think it definitely, especially early on at a younger age, definitely affected me, because you start to be consumed by it because it's all around you. And especially too, if you let your job define you, it's going to really affect you.
I don't know. How could you go to work if you're Urban today and it not be part of your world? Do you think they'll just bounce back and he'll bounce back because he's been through stuff before? Or when you're driving home and you're driving to work and you're at practice, do you think he can just overcome the snap of the fingers, be back and coach and be all good?
He probably can. Urban's done this a long time. And so, I'm sure at times throughout the day, he's thinking of it. But as far as the coaching, I would think probably doing it so long as he has, once he gets back into a meeting, once he's on the practice field, that he does forget about that stuff. I would, because, you're involved in the X's and O's aspect, and then you really, when it comes back, is when you go to your press conference after practice is when it's going to really come back at him again probably, and then he's going to have to go from that, put that behind him as it comes back and try to forget about it, and then go back to his coaches' meetings.
You won your conference last year, Conference USA. You won a bowl game in a blowout fashion. In 1 year, you totally turned down around the program. It was one of the better offenses in the country. You're an offensive guy. Your recruiting is rolling. And you've said, I'm in no hurry to leave here. I know that you love the water. You're from Tampa. You love Boca. And you've moved around a lot in your life. It is funny. So I saw a list the other day of overrated, underrated coaches, and I just sort of rolled my eyes. Joel Klatt said the overrated guys was a jealousy list. And you were on the list, and Nick Saban was on the list. And when you were at Alabama with Saban, every 5 minutes somebody's ripping Nick Saban. Forget overrated, underrated. We know he's great, Lane. You know it, I know it, the world knows it. But when you are at the top of the mountain like Nick, what's the downside to that? Obviously there's pressure, but you've lived in that heat, in that inferno of Alabama. How does Nick handle it? This is a decade long now he's been in this thing.
Yeah, he does an unbelievable job of handling the situation, and he's in a longer version. And I've discussed the Pete Carroll era, and Coach Carroll was there and had one of those, and now Coach Saban has it, and that's just the crazy world we live in. I saw somebody showed me what you're referring to. A list of overrated coaches, and Nick Saban's on the list of being overrated. Or someone writes Lane Kiffin and said, well, I'm partially jealous of him, so I'm going to put him on an overrated list. And I looked at it and said, well, most people don't rate me, because they say I'm not a good coach anyway. So how do I get on an overrated list if I'm not rated? Most people write that I'm not any good as a head coach. So now I'm overrated at it. So I don't know.
By the way, your social media, would you be as active on social media, as funny on social media, as provocative on social media, if you were at, instead of FAU, if you were at Georgia, if you were at, Texas. Are you allowed now to take more risks because you're the little guy poking at the big guy?
Well, Colin, I don't look at it as risk. I've said before, no matter where I've been, I feel like my job is to the president, to the athletic director, to our players, to our fan base. And that has probably hurt me from a personal, national standpoint of how I'm viewed, because I've always tried to do what's best for the program. Whether it's going to Tennessee, that had been down a little bit. So the plan was to create some energy, and make a joke about, going to the swamp and winning and things like that to create buzz and energy. And that doesn't necessarily help in the eyes of other presidents or other athletic directors, because I get that question all the time. Well, why do you put that on Twitter if some presidents, some athletic directors at other places may not like that? And I said, well, that's how a lot of coaches operate. That's not how I do. Those aren't my those are not people in charge of me. Our president here hired me and wanted attention on the university. Our out-of-state applications in 1 year are up 40%. And he said himself, the only thing that changed was Lane Kiffin coming here. So, I feel like I'm just doing my job for the people that hired me and not worried about other people in other people's places and jobs at those places, because that's not my job.
By the way, Lane, you coach for the Raiders. You've been in the NFL. I have questions about Jon Gruden being gone for 10 years. There are businesses, Lane, that you could not be present for 10 years, but I think like Silicon Valley in football seems to change about every 2 years. Let me ask you, if you were gone from football for 10 years, could you walk back into the sport and be effective? Can Gruden do that?
Well, it depends. Could I walk back after 10 years, or could anybody walk back after 10 years and be effective from a offense or defensive standpoint in game planning? Probably not, because you would have fallen behind. Now, can you be a head coach? Sure, guys can be out of head coaching for a while and do it, because some head coaches are just CEOs. They don't even necessarily know the X's and O's of their offense, defense, and special teams. So then it's easier to do, because, again, you're just leading coaches and players. But, if you're calling plays and you're designing an offense or defense, that would be very hard to do, except for in Jon's situation, because he's almost been coaching. He's spent every week preparing for Monday Night Football like a coach, breaking it down. He understands how the game has changed on defense and offense. So Jon would be the one guy that could do it, not just from a head coaching standpoint like others, but from a X and O standpoint. He'll be able to jump right back in.
You have been at the biggest heights of recruiting. USC dominates recruiting, certainly Denver West. Alabama, #1 classes. Somebody said last week, it's easy, Nick Saban. When you cheat, when you have all the best players, I hear this all the time. Lane, you've been at FAU's a smaller school. You've been at the biggest schools. You're known as an elite national recruiter. A lot of people get discouraged with college football. I hear this all the time. Everybody's cheating. They're paying for players. I don't believe that to be true. If I said to you today, Lane, you've been in those battles. Okay, you've been in those battles. If I said to you, percentage of programs that you think do things that are unethical, what would the number be?
I don't know an exact number, but not anywhere near, I think, the way people talk. And a lot of that is because, and I hear it all the time, someone loses. I used to sit in staff meetings as a head coach, and an assistant coach would lose a player to another program, and they say, oh, they cheated. They bought the player, or they bought the mom, or the dad, or whatever it is. And they don't know that at all. It's just an excuse. So I think a lot of times people just say that to take blame off of, okay, why did we lose the player? Could we have done something better in the recruiting process to sign the player? So we're just going to say someone else cheated because, that makes us look better, instead of really dissecting why did you lose the player. So I don't think it happens near as much as people think. And like you mentioned before, people saying Nick Saban, well, it's like cheating because he has better players than everyone. Well, they just didn't walk onto campus and through the doors. He spent time getting them. He's the best recruiter in the world because of the time that he spends. People joke, okay, he doesn't have hobbies. He really doesn't, do anything else. Well, you know what he does? He recruits. So when other coaches on Thursday night, are going home, or, on the 4th of July are actually doing something like a boat or fireworks, he's on the phone with recruits every single day, the entire offseason, and during the season. At night, he has a list of recruits that he's personally calling himself. So he just flat out outworks everyone else. So the people, I was there for 3 years, so the people that say Alabama cheats in recruiting, the only cheating they do is that he just works harder than everybody else.
Yeah. Florida Atlantic, by the way, 11-3 last year. He got. Did you get Coach of the Year? You got a bunch of votes for Coach of the Year. Did you win Coach of the Year?
No, I never win that, because that's other people voting on things. So we didn't win that at USC when we were 10-2, and David Shaw won it, and we didn't win it this year, going 11-3.
Well, you were my Coach of the Year, and you won Conference USA. You won a bowl game. You open up. This will be a fireworks show against Oklahoma. The bowl game was a blast because you guys do all sorts of clever stuff. Lane Kiffin, you're rolling. I'm happy for you. Boca Raton is an amazing place, folks. Lane, thanks for coming on the show.
All right, Colin. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd, or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.